OMG, you guys, I took another Cotton Cuts challenge, but spoiler alert, you're gonna have to stick around to the end of the video to find out what I made. This time, I took a Java box from Cotton Cuts. This is the April 2023 box. If you don't know what the Java box is, this is a monthly subscription that you can sign up for over at cottoncuts.com. Every month you get a pattern, you get a spool of thread, but most importantly, you get coordinated batik fat quarters from Hoffman Batiks. The April box just screamed spring to me, and I knew I wanted to make something with it, but I didn't know what I wanted to make until I did. This is the story of what I made and how I made it. So I've taken a Cotton Cuts challenge or two before, but this one was a little unique in that the team over at Cotton Cuts challenged me. Usually I challenge myself. The whole goal of a Cotton Cuts challenge is that I have to make something using the fabric that I got in the box. Well, that wasn't a hard feat for me because when I got the Java box in April 2023, all of these beautiful batiks screamed spring, and I knew I was going to make something with them. So what you're seeing me do here is what's called foundation paper piecing, or FPP. And by the way, my friend Ian over at the Off Kilter Crafter Ian has done a phenomenal job making a tutorial that shows you about all the things that you need to know on how to do FPP. So if you're seeing me work through this and you're thinking, wow, that looks like fun and I want to do it too, make sure to check out his channel for that tutorial. I'll put a link to the video in the show notes down below. And I've also done a video on this too, but I did my video on how to use freezer paper for FPP, which I am not using here. I'm sure someone's going to ask why, and honestly, it just has to do with how you join the sections. I feel like freezer paper FPP is a good tool for me right now when I'm building out a block or an element that doesn't have to be joined to anything else. But since this block had a number of pieces that all had to be joined to each other, I figured sticking with traditional paper is probably best. So where did I get my inspiration for this project? Well, got it from Target. Nope, not lying, totally got it from Target. Earlier in the day, I had to do a quick Target run. And for those of you that don't know, a Target run is when you say, hey, I got to go to the store to get one thing, and then you totally leave with at least 10 other things that you didn't know you needed or wanted. Yeah, did that too. When I walked in the door to Target, I was immediately hit by a wall of spring colors. There were so many beautiful floral bouquets on display, ready to go for those last-minute Mother's Day gifts. And listen, if I had the money, I probably could have walked out with every single one of those beautiful floral bouquets. But number one, I wouldn't have had enough vases for them, and number two, I didn't have enough money to buy Target out of their flowers. So instead, I just stopped and appreciated the site for a moment, took in all the beautiful colors, and then went and got the one thing that really turned into 10 things and left the store. Later that evening, when I settled into my sewing room and was checking through my Sew Becca email, I saw the challenge from Cotton Cuts, and I knew that whatever I was going to make was going to be a nod to that wall of flowers from Target. I did have a pretty quick turnaround on this, so I was pretty sure I'd only be able to make one flower and not a literal wall of flowers, but maybe next time I'll have more time. I'm curious, have you figured out what flower I'm making yet? If you have, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't, here's a really big tip for you. If you look at the screen, you can see it starting to come together. So let's talk about the fabric that I pulled for my flower. There were two blues that were in the box. One of them was much darker than the other. They were both gorgeous, but I knew I wanted a blue background to represent the sky, and that dark blue was just gonna make the whole block way too dark. So I went with the softer blue. In hindsight, I feel like I could have gone even softer, but I had to work with the fabric that was in the box and I couldn't pull from my stash. For the leaves and the stems, I had two different greens that I pulled. I wanted a lighter one and a darker one just to show a little bit of contrast for those leaves. And then for the flower itself, I wanted to show a little bit of dimension, and so I pulled two pinks, a dark and a soft, to kind of show contrast between the outside of the flower bulb and the inside of the flower bulb. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I knew I wasn't going to be able to make a wall of flowers. I do think this block made multiple times and put into a table runner would be really pretty, but I was on a tight deadline. So I decided I was going to turn this into a mug rug or a mouse pad. This block measures 8 inches when it's all finished, and honestly, I feel like that is the perfect size for a mug rug or a mouse pad. So all that was left to do is get the quilting and binding done. I grabbed another one of the fat quarters from the Java box that I wanted for the backing, which, spoiler alert, is also what I used for the binding. And I decided, since I just wanted to get this done, I was going to go with a very easy quilting design. I decided to echo the entire shape of the tulip about 1/4 inch away from the flower all the way around. And then after I was done with that, which seemed like it only took about 30 seconds, I decided I wanted to quilt some more. And this time I just did a stitch in the ditch inside the seam around the entire tulip. This pattern was honestly very beginner friendly. So if you've been wanting to dive into the world of FPP, I would highly recommend giving this pattern a try. I'll link to where I bought the pattern in the show notes down below in case you want to pick one up. Now that the entire quilt is squared up, it's time to do the binding, and I like to make my binding strips 2 1/4 inches wide. I just like how that looks. I opted to use the same fabric that was on the back, not for any real design purpose, just because I had already cut into that fat quarter for the backing, and I figured this was the most economical way to use my fabric, and then I could leave the untouched fat quarters alone for a future project. Although I love the look of binding when it's tacked to the front and then hand stitched to the back, I knew for this project I was going to do all of the binding by machine. So I had to grab that binding strip that I made, tack it down to the back side of my project, and then once that was fully on the back, it was time to flip it over and sew it to the front. For this, I grabbed my left compensating foot, which is a tool that I learned about from the team over at Juki Junkies. Essentially, this foot has a wedge on the left side of the foot that helps you bump that wedge up with the edge of your binding so you get a nice straight stitch on your binding when you sew it on by machine. So what do you think? Did I nail it or did I fail it? Let me know in the comments down below if you guessed what this project was and if you're going to make one yourself.